standpoint, from a director standpoint, from an overall creative standpoint. So before we get going, I'm just going to share a recent piece of work that I did. And the reason I want to show this first is because for me personally, this felt like a really great example of a piece of work where I was able to follow some of my creative instincts that came to me naturally through the development process. And the reason I say that is because it was right when the COVID lockdown was lifted, and it was for an organization called Ontario Equestrian that needed to raise some funds in order to save their herd of horses. And so what I was able to do, and I don't normally get to do this with my job and within advertising, is I don't really get to write the scripts and see the project from beginning to end. So this was a nice change of pace. I got to conceptually come up with everything, write it, and work with a close team to execute it. So just take a look at it at this. It's not that long.
We built this place from the ground up. We've been through a lot together. You've seen it all. Now, it's a community. We support each other. And when things get hard, we help one another. Times are hard right now, but we're strong. Together, we'll get through this. Not without a little help.
So yeah, like I said, that was just a fun project that I got to work on when the first COVID lockdown lifted. Felt good to be able to give back in some ways, and work together with a small team of people that I worked with in the past, but nobody was doing a whole lot at the time because of the lockdown. So it was really good to be able to stretch the creative muscles a little bit and dive into that one. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about my history. I am now primarily a director, but my background comes from photography and cinematography. I started out wanting to be a cinematographer, and this is a picture of me shooting on a camera called the Red One. I'm not sure if anybody remembers that, but it is kind of the initial digital camera that everybody used way back. It was ginormous. And yeah, funny story, I was shooting a music video here, and that's the first time I'd ever used that camera. I had no idea what I was doing. But anyways, that's how I got into it. And what I was doing mostly is directing and shooting most of my projects. And so I naturally kind of progressed into directing, and I realized that the stuff that I was shooting wasn't looking the way that I wanted it to, looking the way that a lot of other cinematographers' work was looking. And I realized that, I want to work with other people that are way better than me with shooting. So I decided to go primarily into directing, only directing, and teaming up with other talented people to, bring projects to life. So that's kind of the direction that I decided to take early on in my career. And I moved into directing small pieces of content for various brands at, not very big budgets, but still just making it happen, trying to develop a demo reel, and then ended up signing to a production company. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door for shooting commercials. Like I mentioned before, we're talking about creative instincts, intuition, and your creative voice. It's whatever you want to call it. It's more or less all of the same thing. What I have realized lately is creative instincts, it takes a while to build up for some people. It usually comes with lots of experience, and it's not just working experience. What I have come to realize more so lately is it comes from life experience, and that is, the various life experiences that you're going to have in your life are going to be the things that uh, really help dictate your natural instincts and how they translate to the work that you do. And so, if I had any piece of advice from that note, is don't rush it and don't feel rushed. You're gonna constantly feel like everybody around you is doing cool work, mainly because of social media. It gets me too. And I'm constantly reminding myself to don't feel rushed. Don't let that make me feel rushed. Allow these things to naturally build, and that's going to allow you to do the work that you want to do and the work that you're going to be happy with. That's exactly what this next slide says. It's going to help you do the work that you want to do because it will lead you to be true to the work that you're doing and your craft. It's going to help you do better work because you're going to be making decisions based on your instincts. And what that means is you're going to be doing projects where you're going to have to make a decision very quickly. And if you haven't developed, or if your instincts haven't developed naturally through these various life experiences they're going through, or even the work that you've done in the past, those decisions may be more difficult on the fly. Whereas if you have a lot of resources to call from, as far as experiences goes, then those answers may come to you quicker, because it'll just be coming naturally from the instincts that you've built up over time. In order to develop those natural instincts or creative voice or whatever you want to call it, it's important to try different things. A lot of people feel like you need to pick one direction and stick to it. I think that to a certain extent that is important. If you do find something that you want to develop and that you want to specialize in, so to speak, you should, and that you're good at, you should continue going down that path. But while you're starting out and while you're getting going and while you're trying to develop these natural instincts, you have to try different things. Personally, I don't feel that I wouldn't classify myself as a comedy director. I enjoy doing comedy commercials. I don't do them all the time. The few that I've done, I have really enjoyed. They've worked out. But I wouldn't have known that unless I tried. And so this next spot is one that was released a couple years ago, and it did pretty well. And it was more in the comedy realm, and I really enjoyed it. And I wouldn't have known that I could do this kind of thing unless I had tried it. So check this out.
You've heard of those guys that eat, breathe, and sleep hockey? You know, they live at the rink. Well, John Tavares actually lives here.
You mean he spends a lot of time here?
No, I mean he literally brought in his Casper mattress and he sleeps here now. I'll learn to work around it.
Good night, Dave.
Good night, John.
So that was a cool spot to work on. And I think it worked for me from a comedy standpoint because it was kind of in the range of, comedic feeling spots that I fit within. I also resonated with the subject matter growing up in Canada. I played hockey for 10 years. I was a big fan of the Leafs. So everything about that spot just kind of worked out for me. And that's, a good experience as far as natural instincts goes. I was able to draw on a lot of things from my life experience to put into that. A lot of the comedic beats were built from memories of me growing up and playing hockey and stuff like that. So that's why I say it's important to try different things in order to get a sense of what your instincts are made of, your creative voice is made of, and how you can apply that to the projects that you're working on. The business is constantly changing. That is, the commercial advertising business or whatever you want to call it. But I always like to say, don't get bogged down with that and let it be the only thing that defies your creative instincts. You'll go crazy or you'll go mad. I didn't realize this again until later on in my career, where when I set out, my initial feeling was, well, I have to get jobs to make money. That is important, but it is not and should not be the only thing that defines the jobs that you do. You gotta stay true to yourself and true to the work that you want to do and chase those down. You may not make a ton of money at the beginning. It takes time to develop that and get to the point that you want to be at. But if you're just doing it for the wrong reasons, just doing it just to make money, you're going to end up doing a lot of work that you're not happy with. You're going to get burnt out, and it's going to turn from a job that you love to a job that you don't like. And that leads into this slide saying you need to learn how to manage your creative instincts and your I want to work instincts. It's not always going to be about doing things in order to get work. You'll have to stay true to your instincts, or you'll go mad again. With having said that, you do have to find a balance because life is expensive. It's important to be aware of how things are shifting and progressing in the industry, and how you can pivot accordingly. Just stepping back a few slides to where I was talking about how you can't just do things for the money and the work. And I realized that it's tough right now out there. There's tons of opportunity, but there's also tons of competition. So I don't want it to come across like I'm saying, oh, don't do the work you don't want to do if it's not going to pay you. That's not true. I fully realize that we all have to do jobs to survive. There was a saying that I heard a while back, there's jobs for the real and there's jobs for the meal. And I think that's a really good analogy of how you have to look at things. You don't always have to tell people about the jobs that you do for money if you're not proud of them. In developing your creative instincts, it's going to help you spot worthwhile opportunities because you're going to know what you're good at. You're going to be, you'll notice, jobs that come up or opportunities that come up that you want to be a part of because you know that it's something you're going to enjoy. It's something that's in your wheelhouse of something that you're good at, and you can make something from it. So for example, I had an opportunity at the beginning of this year, right before COVID, where a PSA came along and there was almost no money attached to it, but I read the script, it blew me away. I knew it was an incredibly important piece to make. It was something that I was passionate about as far as a storytelling standpoint. It fit within the realm of what I knew I like to work on. And so I chose to take it on, invest some of my own resources into it in order to pull it off because I felt like it was an important cause. And yeah, I don't think that I would have realized that had I not spent the last 10 years of doing this, kind of developing my internal instinct as far as like knowing what kind of work I want to do, what kind of work I want to be known for, what kind of work I want to be a part of. So this was a PSA for a organization called the Hello to More Awareness Tour. It has a very intense backstory that I highly recommend researching if you have a bit of time. I'm not going to go into it now, but attached to it had a very cool piece of technology called deepfake. And you may have heard about this. It's happened. There's been a few articles in the media about it recently, but until we did this, I don't think that there had been any like big commercial spots that had utilized deepfake in a big way. And so what we did was we actually deepfake Joseph Stalin's face on an actor for this next piece. So check it out.
There's a lot of talk about fake news out there today. Not enough credit is coming my way. After all, I invented it. Take the Holodomor genocide. A man-made famine in the Ukraine in the 30s and killed millions. Well, guess which man made it? Denial, censorship, lies. And now, 2020, and no one knows anything about it. Good luck finding anything in the dictionary. Yes, I would say I did a pretty good job covering it up. So next time you are talking about alternative facts, give me the credit I deserve.
So yeah, that was just an example of a project that had a really strong script, and I really felt that I could bring something to that from the years and years of developing, how I wanted to do my projects, the shots, the styles that I wanted to do. And I knew leading up to that in the last few years, specifically, I had really realized that I want to be working closer with actors and developing narratives and stuff like that. So I really felt that this was an opportunity that I recognized that I was able to do that. And I don't know that I would have recognized that, 5 years ago, um, with what I had developed to that point. I wouldn't have recognized this as a very good opportunity to really stretch my creative muscles and bring something to it. And creative instincts, your creative voice, whatever you want to call it, it's what people are going to pay you for eventually, hopefully. But they're not going to call it instincts or intuition. They're just going to do it because you make good work. That's the end of the presentation right now. I'll put my email in here in case anybody had any questions or anything that I know we're going to have a Q&A right now, but if you think of something later on that you want to hit me up about, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any questions. I may not get back to you immediately, but I will get back to you eventually. So feel free to take this down and reach out if you have any questions. This next slide is a short film I did during lockdown, during the COVID, that I shot here with my wife. And it got, some pretty good recognition. It won a Vimeo Staff Pick, and, it's been featured in a few online film blogs and festivals. And yeah, it's been shared all over the place. It's had a really good response. And so it's about 4 minutes long. So I think that what we're going to do is we're going to go into a bit of Q&A, and then potentially we'll let the film play you out, or you can watch it at another time whenever you feel is convenient.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, so we'll do the Q&A, and then we'll play the video for anyone who wants to stay on. They can watch it. So let's jump in with questions. Who are your filmmaking idols?
Ooh, David Fincher. I'm a big fan of his films, but I feel like that's just a really almost shallow answer, because of course, everybody loves Fincher's films. Right now, there's a few commercial directors that are doing really good work, but also their personal projects are very good. So one of my favorites right now is a guy named Webley out of the States. I think he lives in Utah. He's done a few things up in Canada, but some of the work he's done down there, he just did a spot for Oreo, which was amazing. It had such a great narrative to it, really strong visual storytelling, but it also had some subtle narrative elements, which I thought was really great. The client really allowed him to put his mark on it, which was fantastic. So I really recommend checking out his stuff.
Okay, well, we'll need to check that out for sure. What do you do to help get back into a creative headspace when you're feeling stuck?
It's sheer will. Sometimes you just really have to force yourself into it. I feel I'm classic for finding myself in a creative rut. And the hardest thing for me is just getting started a lot of the times. It's such a daunting task. If you can have tons of ideas. I have tons of ideas constantly, but the toughest thing for me is actually getting going. And that's, I think that when I'm most productive, and the best way to get out of those creative ruts that I'm in is just literally forcing myself to sit down and work, dedicating and making a schedule, being like, oh, I'm going to spend 2 days developing this idea. If it goes nowhere after because of the work I've done on it, I'm realizing it's not what it could be, fine. But you really just have to force yourself to put the time in to develop the idea.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think there's just a quick answer to that one. I could talk about that for a long time.
Yeah, I'm sure. We actually have a class joining us today, a class of students. So they have a couple questions here. Could you please describe how photography has influenced your work?
In a huge way. I got into photography relatively early on, as a kid, and was quite interested in taking pictures. And I just constantly did that. And then I think I was more than anything interested in photography. And I wouldn't say that I was ever a very good photographer, but I think that's what eventually led me to being a director of photography. And then even when I got into directing, a lot of my work early on was very visually driven. It was very, what's the best way to say this? A lot of my projects, there weren't, there were actors and stuff in it, but there was never any like true acting. I think that it was mostly just visually driven, just looking for those visuals that told the story. And so I think that getting a sense of framing and how to make a nice image early on was a big factor in especially where I'm at now. Like I work very closely with my cinematographers, and some might like it, some might hate it, but I am very hands-on with how things are framed. And I think that I would attribute much of my experience in photography, which isn't a ton, but it's just something I loved and I did often as a kid, I think contributed to a lot of that right now.
Okay. Interesting. I guess it makes sense. They are very close together.
Yeah, one's just a still image and one's a moving image, and there are different things happening within the frame. You're able to introduce action and movement, which is very exciting. But at the start of that, it's framing, right? Like framing is such a huge thing, and that's always the starting point for me. So learning a little bit of that early on and focusing on framing. And I do remember a director that I used to work with, assist early on, taught me the importance of framing, and that's stayed with me over the years. And it's like I don't focus on it as much as I used to. It's just more of like it's an example of a natural instinct that kind of you need, like it just happens. You're framing up a shot and you know how important it is. You know it looks good. You know it looks bad, solely from working on that stuff over the years.
Yeah. How did you get signed into with a production company?
Persistence. Having a decent body of work. I wouldn't even say this is tough. It's timing. It's right now it was probably tougher than ever because there's so much talent out there. It's a very deep talent pool. Lots of people are going after the same thing. I think that I was very lucky at the time. I had a few pieces of travel, material on my reel where I used to carry my camera around wherever I went, and I would make some travel videos. And then at the time I had shot a few branded content pieces for a company called Air Transat, in which I got to travel to Costa Rica and Mexico. And so those two things really contributed to my reel. And also I think a big thing that companies are looking for is, well, first of all, you have to have good work, but also can you sell yourself? Can you talk to clients? Can you work with creative teams? Like a lot of people think that it is very important to be very talented, but if you can't communicate your vision and you can't communicate with the people that you're working with, it's going to be difficult because you're never just going to be out there on your own making a project for an agency or a company, right? It's a team game, and if somebody's paying you, they're going to want to be involved. So that's a big one. You have to be talented, but you have to be able to communicate also.
Yeah, and it is really a small industry, as we've been hearing throughout our past week and a bit,
Mm-hmm.
That just how small the advertising creative business is. Here's a question: narrative or commercial? What's your preference and why?
Commercial right now, because I believe that it's a good way to develop the craft. You get a good sense of how to work with people, the important people that are going to help you make the films that you want to make in the future. When I first got into commercials, I had no interest in making narrative work, but now it's quite the opposite. I am quite interested in making that stuff. But it's weird. When I did my first commercial, I had never directed a commercial before. I kind of just had an opportunity stumbled into it, got to work with a really great team, and that opened my mind to the various roles, the departments, the people needed to make a project of this nature. And it's no different when you're working on a narrative project. You're going to need all of those things. And so commercial for me right now is just a really great, I do love making commercials. You get to work with the best people on, the best ideas, the greatest ideas, and get to have resources to do it. That makes sense. Like, you get to take a company's money and make usually a cool project where it's a little bit more difficult to get funding for narrative stuff. And that's not to say that it's not possible. It definitely is. But for me right now, as I'm, developing my craft and my instincts and stuff like that, I have really enjoyed the commercial world and the people that I get to work with, and the collaboration that goes into each and every project. It's really great for just developing your ideas and getting a sense for how things work.
Great, and it's great training too, without
It is.
to put in your own money, really.
Yeah, it is, and like you said before, it's a very small world, so everybody knows each other. Everybody is more than willing to help if you have questions about anything. So it's just a really great way to kind of like get in there and figure out how these things are done.
Okay. What was your post-secondary pathway?
I went to a program at Mohawk College called Broadcast Television, and that was interesting because they were more or less gearing people up to go into the broadcast world of like CBC News and stuff like that. It wasn't until I got on the set of a few music videos and documentaries that I really realized that there was a whole other side of the industry that was far more appealing to me. I used to be a bit of a gear nerd. So, seeing the various ways that you could make cool things, and the creativity that went into it versus, and that's not to say that this doesn't exist in the broadcast world, but I just wasn't satisfied. I wasn't creatively satisfied with that. So I started going down that route, and I ended up going to a one-year graduate program at Sheridan College called Advanced Television and Film, which is a great program. I ended up having to drop out a couple months in just because I got really sick. It's a story for another time. I had a kidney transplant. But from that, actually dropping out, and the people I had met, people I've been working with on some of these music videos, I was able to start just getting into the industry, PAing. And like I said, I'm with a director slash cinematographer that was doing a lot of music videos. And so I was able to firsthandly kind of get on set and see how things worked. And it was no turning back after that. I just kept going down that route.
Okay. Wow. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. If you could jump ahead 10 years, what films would you want to work on?
That's a tough one. Interestingly enough, I'm really intrigued in the new short form, maybe that's not the right word, just the short series that Netflix and all these streaming services are doing. Like the 7-part series, it's kind of like taking a film and expanding it, the plot and everything, over a series of 7 1-hour episodes. I think that's great. I love how that's going. I love watching those things, because I feel like you can take you're not crunched into a 2-hour time frame. I do love movies, but like I just finished watching The Queen's Gambit and highly recommend watching that. Fantastic. But I just loved how they took this story, expanded it over 7 1-hour episodes. Everything about it felt like a movie. It just was longer. You got to dive into the character plots a little bit more. They were able to develop the characters a bit more, tell a bigger story. It was awesome. I think in the next 10 years, I'd love to do some of that.
Wow, we'll have to keep an eye on you for sure. See what else there is. What was the biggest challenge you had to face to get into the industry?
Just age and making connections, I think. like I said, I'm going on 34, 35 right now. I've been in the commercial industry for close to 5 years. I've been doing directing or shooting or working in production for the better part of 10 to 12 years. I'm not even, it's probably closer to 12. And for the first 2.5 years in the commercial world, it was really tough to get work just because you're competing against people that are much more established, that have been doing it much longer, that have had 2 years of knowing the people that they're pitching to and working with. And I do attribute, any of my early success to the production companies that I was working with, because they are the ones that make those connections for you. I was able to go out for lunches and stuff like that. It's weird. Your full-time job almost becomes networking, because that classic saying, it's who you know, is true. You do have to have good work. And for some people it's different. This is just my personal experience. For some people, you are just naturally super gifted and do a project and people resonate with it and you'll start getting work right away. Wasn't that way for me. It was a lot of hard work, doing the best that I could on small projects to really get my foot in the door. And then over the years, those relationships and those projects develop. You just have to do good work with smaller budgets. And I think, yeah, that's the biggest hurdle, is you just kind of have to be prepared to not take off. The trajectory of your career may not go in the way that you want it to right at the beginning. And that's how I felt. Like as soon as I signed to a production company, I walked away being like, sweet, I'm like going to be busy, going to make money, going to be doing what I love. And that just wasn't the case. And that's just the truthful, that's just me being honest. But that being said, there's tons of opportunity out there. You just have to hustle, and you have to work hard, and just do good work.
Yeah, I mean, I think this industry for sure it's hard work, but I mean, and you have to network in order to get it, because it's such a close knit industry.
Yeah.
I have time for one last question, maybe two. What do you think the most important aspect of making a film is?
Story. Yeah, like a lot of people get, and I'm guilty of this early on. You get bogged down with, oh, this is what I want to look like, or this is the camera. Like, this is the classic thing, because I kind of came up in the technology revolution where the Canon 5D came out, and then soon after that, Red released cameras, and it was very accessible. All this technology was very accessible. And so the classic question, if you did a good piece of work, is, I still get people being like, oh, what'd you shoot that on? And that burns a little bit, because you spend so much time focusing on the story and developing the story. It really has nothing to do with the camera that you shoot it on. So the biggest, and this is something I do think about a lot for my future when I do want to get into narrative work, or, film, classic filmmaking, or whatever you want to call it, is remember that story is king. Story is always going to be king. And you have to really make sure that if you're going to shoot something, make sure that you're happy with the story. And you have a good understanding of what that story is, because it can be the best looking film out there, but if it doesn't have the substance in the story, it's going to be tough to grasp an overall audience, other than maybe cinematographers or something like that. Like, I still love beautiful stuff. I love beautiful stuff, but if I see something beautiful that doesn't have a strong story behind it, it's just beautiful imagery, which is, nice to an extent. But if you're talking about making films, it's not going to do much for you.
Yeah, people get sucked into a story for sure.
Yeah.
Back to kind of a networking type question. Do you feel that you have to go out of your way to make connections with others who are higher up, or do you feel that connections come more naturally?
Like me specifically, or just in general?
In general.
I think it depends.
Yeah.
I think it depends. So here's an example. Very early on, and even up until this point, I'm constantly trying to touch base with agency creatives, and I am friends with lots of them. And it is not just solely based on trying to get work, but it is important to keep those relationships and develop those relationships. And so being active in doing that, whether it is going out for lunches, meeting up with people, it's a little bit more difficult now because of COVID, but getting in front of people is very important. But on the flip side of that, and this is weird, and this is the first time I experienced it. So the film that I didn't show you, but is at the very end, the one that got the Vimeo Staff Pick, it all of a sudden I had a lot of people reaching out to me. So what I mean by that is you can do like a really good piece of work, and then all of a sudden you're the one getting noticed, and people are starting to reach out to you. So it can go both ways. I find that it's important though to be intentional with your networking and make sure that you are reaching out to people, trying to set up conversations, Zoom meetings, whatever it may be. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily to sell yourself as an artist, a director, or whatever it may be. It's more so just to make those connections, because that person may know somebody who may know somebody who may know somebody, right? So these things happen in the weirdest way. I said for a while that what I was finding is a lot of these connections that you make have a 2-year turnaround time. I would meet somebody and be super excited about it, but then you don't hear from them for 2 years. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, after you start thinking, never going to hear from them again, they reach out to you and they say, hey, I have this really cool job that I think you'd be good for. That's happened at least 3 or 4 times in the course of my career. And so you just have to be persistent, patient, and don't always be trying to sell yourself necessarily. Just try and make those connections, be friends with people, because that's very important. You don't want to develop shallow relationships.
No, and I think patience definitely is definitely key. Just be patient. Don't go too aggressive.
Well, yeah, because it'll come off as either desperate, or people may be like, well, you're a little bit too intense for me. I just don't want to do that right now.
Yeah. Okay, that is all the questions. So thank you so much, Jesse, for sharing your story. It was really I thought it was informative, and we hope that everyone and all of our students did as well. We appreciate your time, and as you guys start to look at the school application process, or just are looking to see where your talents fit in the creative industry, be sure to visit creativefutures.ca. We do have a session scheduled at 3 o'clock. You can still register by visiting creativefutures.ca and click on the 3 p.m. November 19th. Again, Jesse, thank you, and let's watch this video.
Thanks for having me. I'll just flip it back on here.
The thing that scares me the most is bringing it home to my husband. We're essential in that our service is absolutely required during a time like this, but we're not making physical contact with anyone in the public or any citizens, so patience. If you find yourself in a medical emergency and needing to call 911, I'll likely be one of the people answering your 911 call or dispatching the ambulance to send to your location. My husband is immunosuppressed, so even though I'm not a frontline worker, I am still interacting with my coworkers. We've had to make some changes to our home life because I'm absolutely terrified of bringing the virus home from work and having my husband get infected. So I've moved into the basement, and he still continues to live upstairs. When I come home now, I have a whole routine that I have to go through to try and almost decontaminate myself. sure we stay separate from each other while we're walking, but we can have that time together still while still being separate. It is hard having to live like this and having to be separate and be so close but still be so far away from each other. We're living more like roommates now than like a married couple, and when you're used to having that, it's lonely. Just want to hug my husband. Yeah. That's the thing I'm most looking forward to. Just being able to sit on the couch with him and the cat and the dog and just hang out. Yeah, just not live in fear that I'm gonna bring something home and get him sick.
Thanks, Jesse, for sharing that. That was really, really good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we're done. Again, thank you so much.
Oh yeah, no, happy to be here. This was great. I hope
Good.
people enjoyed it, and if anybody has any extra questions, they can email me.
Perfect. We'll drop your email, I think, just on the Creative Futures site.
Okay, that's perfect.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, guys.
Have a nice day.